Hello, and welcome to another episode of Treasury Talent's Ask a Treasury Recruiter. I am Joe Grabowski, joined by Scotty John. This is an Ask Me Anything format conversation where we will take your questions around your job search, your career, anything that has to do with career progression or recruiting and hiring, really, when it comes down to it. We will be taking questions from the audience. We do have some text-in questions along the way. Scotty is currently on mute because he is monitoring the conversation. So if you do have questions specific to your scenario, feel free to jump in and ask. We're more than happy to prioritize those and get those answered since you're joining us live. But otherwise, we do have some questions that have been texted in, and that's what we'll cover first. So as soon as Scotty is up and running, then we will be good to go.
All right, I'm back.
All right. Hey, how are you?
Not too bad. How about yourself?
Doing well, thanks. I'm going to put us on gallery so we can both be present here. All right. Anything from the audience just right off the bat?
Not yet. Happy to jump back in and refresh while we're getting ready here. Nope, not yet.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and start you off with a softball here. Will it hurt my career to take a job outside of Treasury?
Yeah. So assuming that your career is focused on Treasury and that's where you want it to be, and assuming that the outside of Treasury still somewhat relevant with regard to finance, but I think we can make an argument that even if it weren't, the answer to that is no, it will not hurt your career to take a job outside of Treasury. We've heard it now from countless treasurers and other Treasury professionals that it's actually one of the best things that they've done is do a stint in FP&A or accounting or traditional finance or whatever it might be. I don't think we've heard anybody that's like gone completely outside the box into like marketing or sales. Maybe we have, but the point is it definitely does not hurt at all to learn how your counterparts and other business partners are doing things. The reality is, we've talked about this before, Joe, as you know, is if you can understand the business you're in, and you're only going to get better understanding when you work in other aspects, then it's just going to make you a better Treasury professional. So that's my initial thoughts. Do you have anything to add there?
No, it's really just echoing what you said. Is we do hear time and time again from very effective treasurers, very good treasurers within the industry, that actually that varied experience helps them become a better practitioner for a number of reasons, right? As a Treasury professional, you do have to be a strategic partner to the business. You have to understand the business. You have to understand where the cash is coming from, where it's going once it comes in. No better way to do that than to sit in some other seats and take a bigger, different look at the world, I guess, than from what you're used to. So we've talked about it. It's easier to relate to your stakeholders if you've also sat in their seat or you understand the challenges that they face in their seat. And it also allows you to really take that, what you know from the Treasury space, and come up with more effective solutions. And that's how you become a strategic partner to the business. So within reason, yeah, we haven't heard anything where, yeah, I'm going to go become a janitor for 3 months or something like that. No problem if you do. It's I don't think you forget Treasury overnight or anything like that. But calculated jobs outside of Treasury, the corporate finance space. I think Yang Zhu actually did do some time in marketing, if I remember correctly. She had mentioned something about that. But yeah, I don't see any issue with it. And as a recruiter, I certainly would not look down upon someone who got back out of the industry and is trying to get back in or anything like that. Of course, there's going to be a little bit larger curved or maybe a bigger challenge to get the hiring manager to understand that if they don't have that same experience, or maybe they've just come up as a practitioner. But no, I wouldn't see any issue, and I certainly would not hold that against someone if they took a job outside of Treasury.
Yeah, that caveat's really important, and I think it's worth lingering a little bit on just the fact that there are, especially like you say, hiring managers who have grown up in Treasury from analyst all the way up to whatever the position is they're in today. There may be a little bit of selling around that. That being said, we had Damari Drumright on the podcast last Wednesday, and he talked a lot about, regardless of your background, there's always going to be some selling and presentation necessary when you go through the interview process. And he likened it to, if you were going to be presenting to a board, which I thought was really good feedback. And it's relevant for anybody, regardless of whether you're going to do a stint outside of Treasury or not.
Yeah. And that's really relevant to your career just overall, is whether or not you realize it, we're all in sales. We're all a service provider to somebody else. That's what you're getting paid for. When you start to adjust that mindset, I think you take a different kind of perspective at your career. We can kind of tell, even in the interactions that we have with practitioners, who kind of has that mindset and who doesn't, who's transactional, who's a little bit more like, hey, here's why you need to talk to me, opposed to here's my resume, right? So it's just stuff to keep in mind. End of the day, it doesn't matter who you're interacting with. Everyone's a customer. You are in sales, but that's kind of going off of what Damari was saying more so than answering the initial question.
Well, and also, Joe, we just got some comments from our friend John Marshall, who reminded us that consulting is another great opportunity in terms of, ability to learn. And he mentioned too that he actually did a stint in sales for a Treasury bank, which actually does remind me that lots of times people that come from the banking side into the Treasury space, they were in a sales role while they were in banking. So it was selling Treasury services, and then they moved into the practitioner seat. So, I think it just goes as another case in point for why it will not hurt you to do a stint outside of the Treasury space.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, John, for the comment. Appreciate that. And the support shows that we're not too far off base, at least. So anything else from the audience before we get moving?
Not yet.
All right, cool. From your perspective, and I'm sure we'll have similar takes, but what are the main skills hiring managers are looking for these days? Yep, no problem. So I'll jump in with that while Scotty is getting the audio sorted out. Really what we're seeing, I've seen a demand for capital markets. Obviously, companies have taken on a lot of debt over the course of the last year or so, and they're looking at people who can help them negotiate with banks, really, and in some cases be able to trim the number of banks down. Some cases they're looking for an increase in the number of relationships that they have with banks. So being able to navigate the banking space and negotiate capital markets deals, I think, has been something that we see consistently. The other one is just operations. I think the other thing that we hear quite a bit from treasurers or from hiring managers has been, we made it through the pandemic, but what it's done is it's exposed a lot of cracks that I've seen in my own operations, and I need a strong ops person in here to help me get this right. So those would be the main two. Scotty, are you hearing anything or seeing anything differently?
Not necessarily. I mean, again, that's a tough question to answer generally because every job is different and every business need is different. I mean, what you didn't touch on there and what I think kind of rounds out the three major buckets within Treasury is going to be the risk management piece, and specifically around hedging exposures, whether it's FX, interest rates, or commodities. Sometimes insurance gets thrown into that risk bucket as well. But to your point, I'd say the more common ones are what you already mentioned. And the most common is going to be Treasury operations. So if you don't have it, doesn't mean that you're at a disadvantage, especially if you have the other two. But it certainly is something you're going to need to learn along the way if you want to be a well-rounded Treasury professional and ultimately sit in that top spot.
Yeah, and that also touches on, what we talked about a little bit with Damari or from previous conversations, is it's not just the technical skills, right? We hear this time and time again from treasurers that soft skills are absolutely just as important as the technical skills. I'm not saying you can't come in with no technical knowledge whatsoever, but you have to have a combination of the two. So you shouldn't discount your soft skills at the same time. What do we mean by that? Being able to effectively communicate what you're good at, understanding what you're not good at, but also having a plan for how to bridge that gap between what you're good at and what you're not good at. So Scotty, if you're sitting there, you have a heavy FX background, you're interviewing for, say, a Treasury ops role. No, I don't know that, but I'm willing to go get a CTP. Or I have plenty of mentors who are in the ops space and they would be able to teach me in these areas. This is the skill set that I could bring to you. Really taking that sales mentality, that sales approach to it, and not discrediting your own experience or your own skill set, but being able to effectively communicate, again, what you're good at, what you're not.
Yeah, we talk about soft skills often, and included among them, just to be clear, there's obviously lots of things, but like you say, Joe, the ability to communicate is critical. Another thing that most hiring managers want, even if they don't necessarily come out and explicitly say they want it, is somebody who is not only interested in, but also able to learn. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm such a quick learner. In fact, when people talk about how quick of a learner they are, I think sometimes that can, land a little bit wrong. It's just the fact that you have a track record of learning new things over the course of your career. It doesn't necessarily have to be like immediately you can come in 2 weeks, you can be ramped up. But the fact that you have, learned other things throughout your career, that's what's gonna, that's the area that you want to focus on. And also with regard to soft skills, again, communication, kind of all encompassing term with regard to what I'm about to say, but the ability to build rapport with the person that you're interviewing with, because at the end of the day, they're likely going to be the greatest mentor to you. It's awesome if you have other mentors that can help you in learning something new, but the reality is your leader should be your biggest mentor. And so if you can build rapport and start the relationship off in the interview, that's obviously for the hiring manager, that's going to be, they can recognize, oh, well, I get along with this person, and it's pretty evident to me that they're somebody who learns. So I'm happy to help teach them.
Yeah, if you're gonna just to touch on an earlier point, if you're gonna call yourself a fast learner, one of the easiest open-ended questions for interviewing is tell me about a time that you learned something quickly and what you did with it. And if you are going to say that you're a fast learner, but you don't have that example on the back end, it's not going to go well for you. So, anything from the audience?
Nope, not yet.
All right, perfect. Scotty, should I take a job offered knowing that it isn't the right fit for me?
Yeah, like we tend to do here, that's something I'd want to qualify a little bit.
Sure.
It does depend on your circumstances. If you are actively on the market and currently unemployed and you're in a situation where it's going to get more and more difficult to pay the bills, then the answer is unequivocally yes, you should take that job offer. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing here is working to make a living and take care of, our, at very least, our basic needs and our bills, et cetera. So that's one situation.
Mm-hmm.
The other, potential situation that you're in here is that you want to get out of a job you're in and you've got a high sense of urgency to do so. In that case, I'd say it's less clear. What you want to do is you want to look at the opportunity being given to you, and you want to really try to take stock of what could you learn and what maybe is not on the face of it, something that would be altogether obvious. So, just kind of go through an analysis of, okay, what's this job all about? Why isn't it a right fit for me? By now, hopefully you've kind of figured out what's important to you in the next job you take, and make sure you know what your deal breakers are. Because if it doesn't satisfy like what's most important to you in a job, and you have the benefit of continuing to search for a job and you're not in a huge rush, like, yeah, you should pass that job up. If it actually checks the boxes of your main criteria that are important to you, but there's some other things that it doesn't have, I mean, that's where you just have to take stock of, well, what can I learn here? And what is the benefit to me if I do take this job? And then, yeah, I think at that point, maybe you do end up taking it. So again, it's kind of one of those tough ones to answer because it's hard to be general about it, but those are my initial thoughts, Joe.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, in no way are we financial advisors or anything like that. You got to keep the lights on in some way, shape, or form. So that would be my advice is really, if you feel it's not the right opportunity for you, I would probably stay away from it and try to find another way to keep the lights on. It's situational. It all depends on your individual financial situation. With me, the way I look at it is I'm not good at splitting time. I know that. So it's either I got to jump 2 feet into one pool or 2 feet into the hot tub. Like, it's not going to be 1 foot in the pool, 1 foot in the hot tub. It doesn't work that way, because looking for the right job for you is a full-time job at the end of the day. So from my standpoint, if it's a situation where I'm absolutely miserable in my job or anything like that, I'm probably planning my exit strategy, whether or not I have a job. I have a drop dead date where it's like, all right, I can give myself this much time to look for a job or find what I need to do, or maybe I start something on the side where I get some other income coming in. I just like, I take a harder stance on it simply because it's one of the most stressful things you can do in your life is changing a job. And if you're doing it just to make a change to trade one set of problems for another, then you're going to find yourself miserable and probably uncomfortable because you're trying to adapt to a new environment with a job that you don't like. So that would be my harder line stance on it. But there's plenty of merit to what you were saying, and again, we're not life coaches, we're not financial advisors. You asked two recruiters, and you got two different opinions.
Yeah, and the key again is we talk about this often, but this is really important, is what's most important to you.
Yep.
Very few people do this exercise. It's amazing. I mean, we ask people all the time, what are the top 3 most important criteria to you in the next job you take? Some people know, they have an answer for that. Yep. Others, don't. And that's the starting point. If you're thinking about taking a new job, just take some time to determine what's most important to you in the next job you take. And then you always have that roadmap you can measure against. And back to just, in terms of, if you're in a position where you need to take a job, and you take a job that may not be right for you, I mean, I'm sticking to that in terms of what I think. But at the same time, if you've done that exercise, you know what's most important to you, and the job you're thinking about taking checks none of the boxes, like you mentioned, Joe, usually there are ways to continue to get by. If you operate from an abundance mentality rather than a scarcity mentality, then the right job will come by if you can just wait. And, so that's where it's a highly individualized situation.
Absolutely. And that's the one thing in this process you cannot control, and we can't control either. We have that conversation quite frequently, right? Is, hey, I don't know when the right job's coming up for you. It could be tomorrow, it could be 6 months from now. And if you're going to, after you have this defined, that's why we tell people the best time to look for jobs is when you already have a job and you're already happy. That way you can operate from that abundance mentality where, hey, I don't need to be out the door tomorrow. I'm good where I'm at, but if the right opportunity comes along, then I'm willing to make that jump. And that's why you have to think a little bit more proactively and strategically when it comes to networking and your job search, because you just don't control that timeline, and neither do we.
Indeed. Yeah, a really good point. We got a good question from the audience here, Joe, so I'll pitch this one over to you. So the question is, how can you gauge if the people you are interviewing with are passionate about their job, other than asking them what motivates them to do their job?
Why do you show up to work every day? Why did you choose to work at this company? I mean, put them on the spot, because if I'm in the hiring manager's seat, anyone that I'm putting or including in my interview process better be pretty passionate about what they do and better be able to put their best foot forward for both themselves and the company. Not from a disingenuous sales standpoint or anything, but I mean, a good candidate or a job seeker should be interviewing the interviewer just as much as the interviewer is interviewing you, right? So why would you, if you're expected to put your best foot forward as an interviewee, why wouldn't you expect the same of an interviewer? And that's, not a dig at hiring managers or anything like that, but it's also part of the recommendations that we make is, hey, if you're going to include someone in this process and have them face the external market, they better be able to sell the role and sell the company too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think those questions are fantastic that you added there. What makes you want to get up in the morning and come to work? Any variant of that question is key. But the only other thing I would add is, actions do speak louder than words. So you want to pay attention to how the person is saying what they're saying, right? I mean, we've all probably been in a situation where we've been sold a bill of goods, whether it's a job or, being sold something, actually sold a product. Sometimes there's a book, it's on my long list, I've yet to read it. Joe, you might be able to speak to it, but the mom test, right? It's like, okay, what is somebody saying to me? That matters, but how are they saying it matters almost more. And so trying to gauge, pick up, little things about this individual's delivery, and if you want to know if someone's passionate, how passionately are they speaking about what what you're talking about, right? I mean, you can gauge that. That's typically there will be parts of the interview where you're like, oh wow, this person's totally passionate about fill in the blank. So that would be the other thing I would say is pay attention to what they do, not just what they say.
Yeah. Yep. And to your point, Mom Test does sort of touch on that a little bit more geared toward being able to float ideas out there without actually trying to make the sale, because the whole idea, we're going to go into a book club. The whole idea with that is just simply once people realize you're trying to sell them something, then any kind of feedback, if they care about you, will be delivered with quote unquote kid gloves, because they don't want to hurt your feelings. So similar to what you were saying, for sure. Same church, different pew, I guess is what we'll say.
Yeah.
So anything else? Yeah, exactly.
So sorry, go ahead.
No, I was asking if there's anything else from the audience.
Yeah, we do. We have another one. So this is an interesting question because again, this is highly dependent on who you are as a person. But I think we asked this question enough. We can give some good examples. So the question is, will you please provide examples to what are your top 3 must-haves in a new role?
Yep. People, want to like the people you work with. Organizational culture. Is it supportive? Do I like the mission? Some people are against working in certain industries because they don't agree with the overall body of work in the industry. Compensation is always top 3, if not top 2. It's not top for everyone though. That's the thing, and that's why it's individualized there, right? And that's why we ask that question, because I may have a different expense base to cover than you do. So our cost of living are different. We may have different salary requirements, or we just don't care. Maybe we're sitting on a huge trust or something like that, and we just want to work because we like the social aspect of it, whatever it may be. But those are a couple of examples. What did I miss?
Sadly, you and I are not in that latter camp there, but no, I think to your point, the other thing that we hear a lot is role, right? So if I'm a treasury analyst today, maybe top 3 for me is to move into that treasury manager or senior analyst position. You mentioned organization and people, and of course, what goes along with that is company culture. We hear that often. Those are, again, it's different for everybody. And some people it's location, like it's absolutely critical that they stay in the market they're in, even if they know that market is not, the market for treasury. I mean, we focus a lot in the San Francisco Bay Area where there's a lot of opportunity, and there are plenty of people who just have zero interest in relocating to the Bay. Again, it depends a ton upon you as a person, but those are examples. Hopefully that gets you thinking a little bit more about what's most important to you.
Yeah, and the other thing, I think we've touched on it, forgive me if we have, but it's just been the challenge and room to grow. Not necessarily from a title standpoint, but maybe you're a heavy ops person, you want exposure to capital markets or FX. So maybe you're taking a step back if you're a director and you want that exposure. Maybe you're moving to a manager role next or something like that. So that's the whole thing, is it is highly personalized. It's going to mean different things to different people. Sorry, the puppy just came by and yawned. But yeah, you're going to have different criteria for each individual person. That's why you need to just kind of take a step back, think strategically what matters to you, and then be able to define that and communicate that effectively.
Indeed. We've got another good question from the audience here, Joe, and I can think of 2 off the top of my head. We'll see if they're the same that you think of. But the question is, do you have a sense of what companies do a good job of training for treasury, i.e. with internships, rotations, et cetera? For example, GE and Dell used to have good career rotations. So again, I have a couple that come to mind for me immediately, but what are your thoughts around that, Joe?
Still do. GE, Dell, yeah, they're still there. I know that the model's changed a little bit from what they're doing, but very strong pedigree coming out of there. General Motors, local to me. Strangely enough, a lot of former GE people moved over to General Motors, and there you go. I think Pepsi is another strong one that has a very strong rotational program, which a lot of ex-GE over there too. So whichever company started this entire route of, hey, we're going to go through your financial rotational program, it's certainly been replicated, and the people who benefited from it are the people who wind up going through it, right? And then they take that to other areas, and if they're a strong enough professional, they can implement that in their company, and that's how you get the replication here. But those are a couple of additional that I thought of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the only one that you didn't mention that's on my list is Hewlett Packard HP. Just the alumni network from that
Yeah.
group in the Bay Area is significant. But to your point, you have anybody who's from one of those places now as a treasurer or a hiring leader at a new place that you can probably assume that they're bringing a lot of those best practices along with them to the
Yeah.
new company. The other thing I would mention in terms of trying to vet who has good rotational programs would be and I don't know, frankly, I don't know how to do this. This isn't something I've done, but think about like the top 25 business schools in the US and where do the people from those business schools end up when it comes to treasury and or finance, because likely those are also the great rotational programs. So if you wanted to do a quick search on LinkedIn for MBAs at the top 25 schools and then say, okay, where are those people today? Then that company also likely has a really good training and or rotational program.
Excellent question to ask during the interview process too. It's a really, like, if the rotational program, you find it important and it is something that is a criteria for you, it will help you grow and develop and become a more effective practitioner. That's a real easy knockout question there because not everyone's doing that. I can tell you that.
100%. Yep, I agree.
Anything else from the audience?
I haven't refreshed it here in a second, but not as of this moment.
All right, I'm going to hit you with one. I see more and more treasury roles that advocate or require a CPA. What are your recommendations here?
Yeah, so this one's tough for me personally because I think we've talked a little bit about it. Maybe have a little bit of a disagreement, you and I, Joe, on the CTP versus or CTP and CFA versus not having it. I think maybe I'm coming around to your line of thinking there. The CPA is tougher for me. I think again, we're talking about accounting versus treasury. So I would go back to, again, it's hard to give general advice around this. One, you and I, Joe, have talked to hiring managers who have included a CPA, among the necessary criteria that they want in the hire. And when we ask them why, they don't have a good answer. So I think understanding, again, it goes back to asking questions during the interview process and understanding why they have that CPA required, assuming you get an opportunity to interview, even if you don't have a CPA. But you'll probably find some leaders don't necessarily know, and or it's like, oh, it'd be a nice to have, but there's not really a requirement there. So yeah, I mean, that's a tough one for me. Again, I think again, depends too on, are you interested in technical accounting, hedge accounting, the types of basically just accounting. Are you interested in accounting? If you are, then you should get a CPA. If you're not, then maybe just don't apply to the jobs that require one. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to take a little bit more extreme approach on this. I think typically when you'll see a CPA, it's because there are a lot of similarities between, say, like an HR function or a recruiting function and treasury. What I mean by that is typically looked at as overhead, not a traditional cost center, or I'm sorry, not a traditional revenue center. It's more looked at more like a cost center. What do you try to do with a cost center? You try to throw as much crap in there as you possibly can to get the most bang for your buck because you know it's not going to generate you money. I'm not saying that's the right thing to go or to do. This hits home pretty closely for me because I've run corporate treasury, or I'm sorry, recruiting teams. And you see it firsthand where it's just like, all right, this isn't making the company money. What do we do with it? And how do we combine as many functions as we possibly can to limit that overhead? That's usually the first red flag for me when we're talking to clients is, well, are you trying to hire an accountant or are you trying to hire a treasury person? Because it's like mixing oil and water in some cases. And most people will transition from accounting into treasury and don't want to go back to accounting. So that's a lot of the coaching that we do with clients when they ask about CPAs and that type of stuff. You're talking about two completely different skill sets, maybe the pedigree or the backgrounds in accounting, but then you evolve. And that's oftentimes when you have those mixed messages, That's why companies hire or struggle to hire, and that's why these jobs stay open for so long, is because they want someone who has the accounting background, but is a treasury practitioner who still wants to do accounting work. And there aren't a whole lot of people out there. People change jobs and industries for a reason. So yeah, that would be my thoughts around it. That's the first red flag. Would it stop me from applying to a job? No. But if I get an interview, my very first question is, why does this require a CPA? Because that'll be a very short conversation for me.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, it's like most treasury professionals that we've talked to, they're not really interested in going into accounting or back into accounting. So I think it's safe to say that, yeah, if it's required, it should probably just end the conversation there. And like you mentioned, we've talked to plenty of clients who, when we ask them, they're like, "Oh, yeah, I don't really know." So yeah, that's likely what's happening. On that note, we got a question I can answer really quickly. Do you see any CFO roles that are not CPA? The answer is we don't see CFO roles, frankly. If we see a CFO role at all, it's a CFO role focused on a treasurer's background. So then the answer would be no CPA requirements. So
Yeah.
different for, at least for me personally, I can't speak to that question at all because we don't focus at all on CFO positions.
Yeah, it all depends on the type of CFO that the company is looking for. Just from a general perspective, for us, if we do take on a CFO search, it's because they do want someone who sat in the treasurer's seat or has come through the treasury track, opposed to the traditional accounting track. Most companies CFOs, that's why there's a mismatch usually between treasury and CFOs, or why CFOs hire treasurers, is because they want that other aspect. They want the other view that is not a traditional accounting perspective, because treasury is not accounting at the end of the day. There are aspects of it, but it's not the same thing.
Indeed. Well, that so far does it. Before I just refreshed again, no new questions. Do we have any more text-in questions, Joe, before we wrap it up?
No, I think that covers everything, and I know we're hitting a little over the 30-minute mark anyway. So if we have nothing else from the audience, we'll go ahead and wrap it up.
Yeah, it looks like we don't. So that's it.
With that, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the engagement, for all your questions. If you do have questions that weren't answered today, or you just want to have them answered personally instead of putting them out there in the public, feel free to reach out to either one of us. We'll be happy to jump on an email, jump on a call, or answer an email. And with that, we'll let you go. Thanks for tuning in.